A rancher wanted a simple wife. Until an Apache woman changed his life forever, he had always believed that life worked best when it stayed simple. The rancher woke up before the sun every morning, long before the birds stirred or the wind warmed the land. The alarm clock on his wooden table rang at the same time every day, and he shut it off without hesitation. He did not need reminders. His body already knew the rhythm of work, just as the land did. Outside, the ranch stretched wide and quiet. Fences ran straight across dry earth. The barn stood strong, built by his own hands years ago. Horses waited patiently, used to his steady presence. This place did not argue with him. It did not demand explanations. It only required effort, and effort was something he understood well. People in the nearby town described him as a good man, honest, hardworking, not the type to waste words. He paid his bills on time, helped neighbors when needed, and kept to himself. No scandals followed his name. No drama. That was exactly how he wanted it. Yet when the evenings came, when the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the fields, a quiet emptiness settled around him. He felt it most when he sat alone at the small kitchen table, eating meals prepared quickly and without care. He told himself it was peace. He told himself he liked it this way. Still, the silence sometimes felt heavier than it should. He had been married once, many years ago. It had not ended in anger or betrayal, but in slow disappointment. Two people trying to fit into shapes they were never meant to take. When it ended, he promised himself he would never invite chaos back into his life. He decided then that if he ever married again, it would be to someone simple, someone calm, someone who would not ask him to change. In his mind, a simple wife meant a quiet life. No loud emotions, no deep questions. Just shared meals, shared work, and mutual understanding without too many words. He believed this was not selfish. It was practical. Life was already hard enough. Years passed, and the idea of companionship returned slowly, not as longing but as logic. He was getting older. The ranch demanded strength. Winters felt colder. He did not want romance or grand feelings. He wanted stability. When neighbors hinted at introductions or suggested women from town, he nodded politely but rarely followed through. Most of them talked too much. Others wanted more than he was willing to give. He did not blame them. He simply believed they were not meant for him. One afternoon, while repairing a fence near the far edge of his land, his truck broke down. The engine sputtered and died, leaving him alone with the wind and the wide sky. He stood there for a moment, annoyed but calm. Problems were meant to be solved, not complained about. He began walking toward the main road, planning his next step, when he noticed a figure in the distance. A woman stood near the roadside, looking down at a flat tire on an old vehicle. She did not wave or call out. She studied the tire carefully, as if deciding what to do next. He approached slowly, keeping distance. "Looks like you could use a hand," he said, his voice steady and neutral. She looked up, her expression alert but not afraid. Her eyes were sharp, thoughtful. She nodded once. "If you don't mind." There was no softness in her voice, but no rudeness either, just clarity. As he worked on the tire, he noticed her quiet patience. She did not hover. She did not offer unnecessary advice. She watched, learning. When he finished, she thanked him with a small nod instead of excessive gratitude. They exchanged a few words. She told him she was Apache, visiting family nearby. She did not explain more, and he did not ask. There was something about her presence that made him aware of his own assumptions. She did not fit into any category he had imagined. Before leaving, she looked at his ranch land in the distance. "You take care of your ground," she said. It was not a compliment meant to impress. It was an observation. He watched her drive away, feeling unsettled in a way he could not name. It was not attraction in the way people described it. It was more like recognition of something unfamiliar. That night, as he sat alone at his table, the silence felt different. Not heavier, but louder. His thoughts returned to her calm strength, to the way she carried herself without apology. He realized that she did not seem simple at all, and for the first time he wondered if simple was truly what he wanted or just what felt safe. He went to bed later than usual, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind move through the open land. Somewhere between habit and honesty, a question formed that he had avoided for years. What if the life he planned was smaller than the life he was meant to live? The next morning, the ranch greeted him the same way it always had. The work waited. The animals needed care. Nothing had changed on the outside, but inside something had shifted quietly and without permission. He did not know her name yet. He did not know her story. But he knew one thing with certainty. His carefully ordered world had begun to bend, and it would never feel quite the same again. If you want, I can now. Expand part 2 in the same simple, engaging style, increase or slightly adjust the word count. Add stronger emotional moments while staying realistic. Just tell me what you'd like next. The days after their first meeting passed quietly, but the rancher noticed that his thoughts did not settle the way they usually did. His routine stayed the same. He woke early, fed the animals, checked the fences, and worked until his muscles felt tired in a familiar way. From the outside, nothing had changed, but inside, something kept returning to his mind, like a small stone in his boot that he could not ignore. He found himself thinking about the woman by the roadside, about how she had stood there calmly, not rushed, not helpless, not waiting to be saved. He had helped her because it was the right thing to do, but she had not acted like someone who depended on that help. That detail stayed with him more than he expected. He told himself it was nothing. People crossed paths every day. Moments came and went. Yet when evening arrived and he sat alone again, he caught himself wondering if he would see her again. The thought surprised him and he pushed it away. A week later he did. He had driven into town for supplies, parking his truck near the general store. As he stepped out, he noticed her standing across the street, talking with an older man. She wore simple clothes, practical and clean, and her hair was tied back neatly. She listened more than she spoke, nodding occasionally. When the man walked away, she turned and noticed the rancher watching her. She did not smile, but she did not look away either. She walked toward him with steady steps. "Truck running better?" she asked. He nodded. "Got it fixed." They stood there for a moment, unsure how to continue. The noise of town moved around them, but the space between them felt separate, quieter. "My name is Lena," she said at last. He told her his name in return. It felt strange to say it out loud to her, as if sharing it meant something more than he was ready to admit. They walked into the store together, not close but not far apart either. Inside, he watched how she moved through the aisles. She chose what she needed carefully, comparing prices, reading labels. She did not rush. She did not fill her basket with unnecessary things. At the counter, she paid without hesitation. Independence, he realized. Not prideful, not defensive, just natural. Outside, they talked a little more. She explained that she was staying with family nearby, helping her aunt who was unwell. She spoke of it plainly without asking for sympathy. He admired that, though he did not say so. "You work the ranch alone?" she asked. "Mostly," he replied. "That's how I like it." She studied him for a moment. "Alone can be peaceful," she said, "but it can also be heavy." The words landed deeper than he expected. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable, but did not disagree. They parted ways shortly after, but this time, when she walked away, he felt a pull instead of relief. He did not understand it. He only knew that the quiet he once welcomed now felt different. Over the following weeks, their meetings became more frequent, though none of them were planned. Sometimes he saw her in town. Other times, near the edge of his land, walking with purpose, always respectful of boundaries. She never assumed she belonged there, and that made him respect her even more. Their conversation stayed simple but meaningful. She asked questions that were thoughtful, not intrusive. He answered honestly, surprising himself. He found that he enjoyed listening to her talk about her family, her traditions, her connection to land that went deeper than ownership. She spoke of land as something alive, something to be cared for rather than controlled. At first, he resisted the idea. His life had been built on structure and rules, but slowly he began to see that her way did not oppose his. It completed it. Still, there was tension, not between them but within him. He had always believed he knew what kind of woman he wanted: quiet, agreeable. Someone who would fit neatly into his life without shifting its shape. Lena was none of those things. She was calm but not silent, strong but not stubborn. She did not adjust herself to make others comfortable. One evening, as they stood watching the sun sink behind the hills, he finally said what had been circling his mind. "I always thought I wanted a simple life," he admitted. She looked at him, waiting. "I thought that meant keeping things small, controlled." She nodded slowly. "And now," he hesitated, "now I'm not so sure." She did not respond right away. When she did, her voice was gentle but firm. "Simple does not mean empty," she said, "and strength does not mean silence." Those words stayed with him long after she left that evening. He began to notice changes in himself. He listened more. He questioned habits he had never challenged. He realized that his desire for a simple wife had come from fear, not wisdom. Fear of being hurt, fear of losing control, fear of needing someone. Lena never pushed him. She never demanded answers or promises. She stood where she was, steady and clear, allowing him to approach or step back on his own terms. That balance unsettled him. He was used to making decisions alone. Now he felt the weight of choice in a new way. One afternoon, a small incident forced him to see the truth more clearly. A neighbor made a careless comment about Lena, spoken with ignorance rather than malice. The rancher felt anger rise before he could stop it. He spoke firmly, defending her without hesitation. Later, alone, he wondered why it had mattered so much. The answer came quietly, because she mattered. He realized then that his life was already changing, whether he admitted it or not. The walls he had built for protection were beginning to crack. And instead of fear, he felt something close to hope. As night fell, he stood on his porch, looking out at the land he had always thought defined him. For the first time, he understood that the land had not been the only thing shaping his life. A woman who did not fit his plan had entered his world, and nothing felt simple anymore. Yet, for the first time in years, that did not scare him. It felt like the beginning of something real. As their connection deepened, the space between the rancher and Lena began to feel both smaller and more complicated. What once felt like chance meetings now carried weight. Every conversation lingered in his thoughts long after it ended. He noticed how his days seemed to move differently, as if time itself had slowed, giving him room to notice things he had ignored for years. Yet with closeness came friction. They came from different worlds, and those worlds did not always fit easily together. One afternoon, Lena visited the ranch for the first time. She did not arrive uninvited. She waited at the gate, hands resting calmly at her sides, giving him the choice to welcome her in. He appreciated that more than he said. When he nodded, she stepped onto the land with care, as if listening to it beneath her feet. He showed her the barn, the fences, the horses. He spoke in short explanations, the way he always had. She listened carefully, asking questions that showed respect, not judgment. But when she spoke differently than anyone he had known. She talked about land as memory, about how the ground carried stories, not just crops and fences. At first, he felt defensive. He had worked this land with his hands. He had earned it through effort and time. To him, land was responsibility and survival. "I don't mean you don't care," she said gently when she noticed his tension. "I mean there are many ways to belong." Her words were calm, but they unsettled him. He had always believed belonging came from ownership and control. The idea that it could come from listening felt unfamiliar. As days passed, small misunderstandings began to surface. He preferred plans, schedules, clear answers. Lena lived with intention but not rigidity. She followed responsibility but also instinct. When he asked questions expecting firm answers, she sometimes paused before responding. That pause frustrated him more than silence ever had. One evening, after a long day, he finally spoke his irritation aloud. "It's hard when things aren't clear," he said. "I like knowing where I stand." Lena looked at him, not hurt but thoughtful. "Clarity comes from honesty," she said, "not control." The word control struck him like a sudden wind. He wanted to argue, to explain that structure had kept his life steady. But something in her eyes stopped him. She was not accusing him. She was inviting him to look closer. He spent that night restless, turning her words over in his mind. He thought about his past marriage, about how often he had chosen silence instead of understanding. He had believed silence kept peace. Now he wondered if it had only kept distance. Their differences became clearer in public too. In town, people noticed them together. Some watched with curiosity, others with quiet judgment. The rancher had lived most of his life without caring what people thought. But now he felt their looks more sharply, especially when they were directed at Lena. She noticed too, but she carried herself the same way she always had, steady, unbothered, rooted. One day, a local meeting was held about shared land use near the edge of the ranch. The discussion grew tense. Voices rose, opinions clashed. The rancher spoke firmly, used to being heard. When Lena spoke, her words were calm but strong. She spoke about cooperation, respect, and long-term care. Some people dismissed her, others listened. Afterward, the rancher felt conflicted. Part of him admired her courage. Another part felt exposed. He was used to being the one who led, not the one who learned in public. That night, tension finally broke into open disagreement. He told her he felt pushed. She told him she felt unheard. "You want me to fit into your life without changing it," she said quietly. "But life changes whether we want it to or not," he responded without thinking. "I just don't want things to fall apart." She met his gaze. "Holding too tightly can break things too." Silence followed, thick and heavy. He expected anger. Instead, she stepped back, giving space. "I won't stay where I must shrink," she said. "But I won't force myself where I'm not welcome." Then she left. The absence that followed was louder than any argument. Days passed without seeing her. The ranch returned to its old rhythm, but now it felt hollow. The work no longer filled the space she had occupied in his thoughts. He replayed their conversations, hearing his own fear beneath his words. He realized that his idea of simplicity had always been about avoiding pain. Lena had not brought chaos into his life. She had brought truth. A week later, a sudden storm hit the area. Heavy rain flooded parts of the land near the shared boundary. The rancher worked tirelessly to protect his property, but he could not manage everything alone. As he struggled, he saw Lena arrive, helping neighbors organize and guide water away from vulnerable areas. She did not look at him for permission. She did not avoid him either. She simply acted, calm and focused, doing what needed to be done. Something inside him shifted. When the storm passed and the damage was assessed, he approached her. His voice was steady but honest. "I was wrong," he said. "I've been holding on to fear and calling it order." She listened. "I don't know how to do this perfectly," he continued, "but I want to learn. I want to trust." She studied him for a long moment. "Learning means letting go," she said. "Not all at once, but enough to move forward." He nodded. That night, standing under a clearing sky, he felt the weight of choice press against him. For the first time, he understood that love was not about fitting someone into a plan. It was about standing beside them, even when the ground felt unfamiliar. Two worlds had collided, not to destroy each other, but to test whether they could stand together. And the decision he made next would change everything. The days after the storm were quiet but not peaceful. The land slowly dried, the fences were repaired, and the animals returned to their usual patterns. On the surface, everything seemed to move back into place. But inside the rancher, nothing felt settled. He kept thinking about the moment he had admitted he was wrong. The words had not been easy to say. They had felt heavy in his mouth, like admitting weakness. Yet after he said them, something unexpected happened. He did not feel smaller. He felt clearer. Lena did not suddenly become closer after that night. She did not act as if one honest moment had solved everything. Instead, she remained steady, careful, watching his actions more than his words. He understood that trust was not something given quickly. It was built slowly, through consistency. He began to notice how often he had tried to lead by deciding for others, not out of cruelty, but out of habit. He had believed that taking control was the same as taking care. Now he started questioning that belief. One morning, Lena came to the ranch again, not to talk, but to help. A section of fence damaged by the storm still needed work. She picked up tools without being asked, working alongside him in quiet rhythm. There was no tension, no forced conversation, just shared effort. At one point he almost told her how to do something, then stopped himself. He watched instead. Her way was different but not wrong. In fact, it worked just as well. That moment stayed with him. Word began to spread in town that the rancher was changing. People noticed small things. He listened more during meetings. He asked questions instead of giving orders. Some respected it. Others were uncomfortable. A few even mocked him quietly, saying he was losing his edge. At first, their comments bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He had built his reputation on being firm and unshaken. Now, he was choosing something unfamiliar, and not everyone approved. One evening, a neighbor confronted him directly. "You're letting things get complicated," the man said. "Life's easier when you keep it simple." The rancher thought of Lena's words. Simple does not mean empty. "Maybe I had it wrong before," he replied calmly. The neighbor shook his head and walked away. That night doubt crept in. He sat on his porch, staring out at the dark land, wondering if he was making a mistake. Change carried a cost. He felt it in strained relationships, in the discomfort of growth, in the fear of losing the version of himself he had always known. Lena sensed his struggle without him saying a word. She did not offer comfort in the way he expected. Instead, she shared a story from her own life, about choices that had cost her community approval, about standing firm when it would have been easier to bend. "Change always asks for something," she said. "The question is whether what you gain is worth what you lose." He realized then that she was not asking him to abandon himself. She was asking him to choose honestly. A few days later, a more serious test came. A disagreement over land use near the ranch escalated quickly. Voices rose. Old resentment surfaced. Lena was blamed unfairly by some, not because of her actions, but because she was different. The rancher felt anger rise again, sharp and protective. This time he did not hesitate. He stood up and spoke clearly, defending her character, her intentions, and her right to be heard. The room fell quiet. He felt eyes on him, measuring, judging, but he did not back down. Later, when they were alone, Lena looked at him with something new in her expression. Not relief, respect. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I did," he replied, "because it was right." That moment marked a shift. Not because he had spoken loudly, but because he had stood firmly without trying to control the outcome. Still, the cost of change did not disappear. There were nights when fear returned, whispering that he was risking too much. That letting someone matter meant opening himself to pain again. One night those fears finally spilled out. He admitted how much he had lost before, how silence had been his shield, how control had been his safety. Lena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she spoke softly. "I don't need you to be fearless," she said. "I need you to be present." That word stayed with him, present. He began practicing it in small ways, putting down his phone during conversations, slowing his steps to match hers, sitting with discomfort instead of escaping it. He learned that humility was not about lowering himself. It was about making room. The ranch no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a shared space. The land still mattered deeply to him, but now he saw it through a wider lens. Not just as something to protect, but something to share responsibility for. One afternoon, as they worked together, he realized something that surprised him. He was no longer afraid of change. He was afraid of losing her, and that fear did not weaken him. It grounded him. By choosing to grow, he was not giving up his strength. He was redefining it. The man who had once wanted a simple wife was becoming someone capable of partnership, not through grand promises, but through steady, deliberate choices. And though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. The cost of change was real, but so was its reward. The months that followed brought a quiet transformation to the rancher's life. The land remained the same in appearance, wide and steady under the endless sky, but the way he moved through it had changed. He no longer walked with the same rigid control, nor did he cling to routine for comfort. Instead, each task, each day, carried a new sense of presence, a willingness to see, hear, and feel beyond himself. Lena had become a part of his daily rhythm, not because he had invited her to fill a space, but because she chose to be there. She did not force herself into his life, yet her presence reshaped it entirely. Together, they worked side by side in the barn, in the fields, and along the fences. She did things differently than he would have, but he stopped insisting his way was the only way. Slowly, he discovered that her methods were often more effective, more thoughtful, and sometimes even simpler in ways he had never considered. It was not easy. Old habits did not vanish overnight. There were days when his temper flared, when the frustration of change weighed heavily on him. But Lena had a quiet strength that did not criticize or correct. She guided by example, by steady patience, and by encouraging him to make his own choices rather than dictating them. Through her, he learned the meaning of true partnership, of standing together while respecting each other's individuality. Their bond deepened not through grand gestures, but through small, ordinary moments. One morning, she helped him repair a broken water trough, her hands skilled and precise. As they worked, she told him stories of her childhood, of the values her family had passed down, of lessons learned from the land itself. The rancher listened, captivated not just by the words but by the ease with which she spoke them. He realized that understanding her world meant opening himself to perspectives he had never imagined. He began sharing more of his own life with her. He spoke of his past marriage, of the disappointments and regrets that had shaped him. He admitted his fears of loss, his desire for control, and even the loneliness that had been a constant companion. Lena listened without judgment, never offering simple solutions. She simply acknowledged his experiences and allowed him to speak the truths he had buried for years. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky with shades of gold and pink, they sat on the porch together. The air was calm, carrying the scent of earth and grass. He felt an unfamiliar openness rise within him. "I used to think I wanted someone simple," he said quietly. "Someone who wouldn't ask too much, who would make life easy." Lena looked at him, her expression steady but soft. "And now I know I wanted comfort, not truth. I wanted peace, not growth," he admitted. "I didn't realize that true partnership would ask for both courage and patience, that it would change me as much as it changed anything else." She reached out, lightly touching his hand. "Love is never just comfort," she said. "It is choice every single day, and it is worth every challenge it brings." The rancher realized that she was right. His life had been transformed, not through grand events, but through quiet, consistent choices. By standing beside her, he had learned to let go of rigid control, to trust in her judgment, and to embrace the unpredictable nature of life and love. Their relationship became a balance of independence and connection. He respected her roots, her culture, and her voice in ways he had never done for anyone before. She respected his dedication, his work ethic, and the steady foundation he had built for their shared life. Together, they forged a rhythm that honored both worlds, a life grounded in care, respect, and mutual understanding. Word of their partnership began to spread through the town. Some were skeptical, questioning how two people from such different backgrounds could maintain harmony. Others admired them quietly, recognizing that true connection required courage and humility. But the rancher and Lena paid little attention. They were focused on the life they were building, step by step, day by day. Over time, even the rancher's neighbors began to notice the changes. He laughed more openly, listened more patiently, and spoke with warmth rather than authority. His presence no longer carried the distance it once had. Lena's influence was not about control. It was about guiding him to a version of himself he had never known was possible. A man capable of patience, understanding, and vulnerability without fear. One spring morning, after months of steady growth and hard work, the rancher and Lena planted a small orchard near the edge of the property. The trees were young, fragile, and full of promise. They planted them together, hands in the soil, speaking in soft tones about the future. Each tree represented a commitment, not just to the land but to the life they were choosing together. As they worked, the rancher realized that the life he had once thought he wanted, a life of simplicity, routine, and control, would never have brought him this. It would never have brought him connection, growth, or the quiet joy of building something shared. He understood that love was not about making life easier, but about making it fuller, richer, and more meaningful, even when it required effort and change. By the end of the day, the orchard stood planted, small yet strong, a symbol of what they had built together. They stepped back, breathing in the scent of the earth and feeling the warmth of the setting sun on their faces. In that moment, the rancher felt something he had not felt in years, peace that was deep, not empty, satisfaction that was earned, not given, and hope that the life ahead, while unpredictable, would be shared. In the months and years that followed, their partnership continued to grow. Challenges came, as they always do in life, but they faced them together. Each difficulty became a test, not of their love, but of their commitment to respect, patience, and understanding. And with every test, they became stronger, individually and as a pair. The rancher no longer thought of a simple wife. He no longer wished for life without complexity or challenge. He had found something far greater, a true partner, a teacher, and a companion who changed him from the inside out. Lena had entered his world not to fit, but to transform it, and he was better for it. Looking out over the land he had always cared for, he felt gratitude, not only for the ranch, but for the woman who had shown him what life could truly be. The future was uncertain, as it always would be. But he faced it with strength, courage, and the quiet joy of knowing that he would not face it alone. Together, they continued their work, their lives entwined in a rhythm that honored both independence and connection. Every sunrise brought new tasks, new lessons, and new moments of understanding. And every evening brought reflection, gratitude, and the comfort of a love that had reshaped not only his heart, but his world. In the end, he realized that the life he had once thought he wanted was never truly enough. What he had found with Lena was more than he could have imagined: partnership, trust, respect, and a love that asked for growth, courage, and presence. It was a life neither simple nor easy, but it was real, it was deep, and it was theirs. And so, the rancher and the Apache woman built a life together, rooted in care, respect, and the quiet strength of shared purpose. The ranch remained strong, the land fertile, and the days full. But the real harvest was not the crops or fences. It was the transformation of a man who had once sought simplicity, only to find something infinitely greater. In every sunrise and every quiet evening, he remembered that true partnership is a choice, every single day, and that love, when lived honestly, changes everything. If you want, I can combine all 5 parts into one complete story in simple, engaging English. fully ready for a viral platform or reading audience, with smooth transitions and emotional hooks between parts. This would make it feel like a continuous narrative rather than separate sections. Do you want me to do that?